and welcome to the CCCNews podcast. I'm Robin. I'm here with Meg from Helping Hands Against Violence. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on the show. I'm so grateful to talk to you today about the work you guys are doing in our various communities. Not just you were based in Hood River, right?
Yes.
And do you work and do stuff in the Dalles?
I do.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like
yeah.
that?
I come over and speak at organizations over here as well.
Nice. And do you serve clients? Where do you guys serve clients from?
Hood River.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
Amazing. Sweet. So tell me a bit about what you guys are doing and how long you've been doing it for. I understand it's been going on a long time. So yeah.
So speak a little bit to what you said a minute ago about who we serve. We do receive clients from outside of Hood River County. Given that it's such a small community, we want to have awareness to that. So people may leave their smaller community and come to Hood River, and we understand. We also, the biggest thing that we provide, or one of the things we provide for survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and or stalking is shelter. So we have a shelter in Hood River where we can host 6 families.
Oh, wow.
So up to 14 people, and each family unit gets a room. And they have that private space, and we have some community spaces in the house, and we get food delivered every week for survivors. We have a little clothing closet that people can shop from, even if they aren't a survivor. And we also have toiletry items and just emergency needs, because sometimes people will come in with nothing. If they're fleeing a situation where they're feeling unsafe. So the shelter is based in Hood River, and we will house people from other counties in the area. Even we've had people come in from out of state.
Oh, wow.
So we want to meet the needs of survivors. So we don't try to draw lines there. And I don't know if you want me to go into more of my services or more about the history of the organization.
It sounds so invaluable for those folks that are in that time of that moment of their life. They need that, right?
Yes.
It's this short little window for folks, hopefully, right? It's a few months or, and just having that little bit of help to get through, that must be completely pivotal in terms of the outcomes or how people are getting through some of these things, for sure.
Yeah, we are, as you said, we are a temporary shelter. So we start out saying that we're a 60-day shelter, but we usually extend, because for people to find permanent housing in such a short time window is challenging. Mm-hmm. So we do require that, survivor, anyone staying in the shelter has some requirements and goals that they're meeting, but as long as they're meeting their goals, we have a check-in meeting, and then we'll usually, are able to extend, and with the goal of being to reduce barriers to survivors. Mm-hmm. And one of those barriers being housing, especially, if there's children involved and whatnot. We're very compassionate to that. So, yeah.
That's got to be, such an important resource for those folks, for sure. That's so cool. So tell me more about those kind of services, like what are the things you guys are offering? So the shelter, and that's kind of on the intervention side.
Yes.
Is there prevention as well?
Yes. Yeah. So other services that we do, so more of the downstream services are we are lucky enough to have cars, so we can provide transportation. We have a bilingual advocate, so we are able to provide Spanish translation support for legal documents like restraining orders or divorce paperwork. Oh, wow. Especially since we have such a large Hispanic, Latino farm worker population in the Hood River Valley. And we also are able to provide advocacy and a crisis line. So we have a 24/7 crisis line.
Wow.
And we have advocates that are there on the crisis line. And we are bound by one of the beautiful things that I love to share is that we are bound by advocate privilege, which means you have to sign paperwork, even if we're subpoenaed, for us to share any information that you share with us. So I like to really share that with people who, like especially teens, because a lot of times teens are surrounded by mandatory reporters. And so they can call the crisis line. And sometimes we're just a space for people to feel seen and heard. And I really try to bring that, push that home to people. It's like, you know, one person called me and she was a concerned friend. And she said, my friend is determined that she has to do X, Y, and Z before she can leave her situation. And I said, well, you know, we're here to support her doing X, Y, and Z. Like, she doesn't have to do it alone. And we provide other services like helping people find temporary shelter, like at a motel or something like that if they're fleeing an unsafe situation. We will provide help work with partners like DHS and things like that. And we also are really invested in just being there for our community in this capacity. And we love working with community partners and just helping with education. So the prevention side of it, like you were asking about, that's sort of my role. So I'm the prevention educator. One of the things I do is teach about sexual assault in the schools and dating violence and healthy relationships. So that's something that I love doing. And then I also work at the, I'm going to be, so I've only been around for 4 months now. So I'm going to be going to the Columbia Gorge Community College. I've already spoken at the women's studies class at the Hood River Community College. So going into the colleges and teaching about sexual assault, but also going into organizations and teaching about these issues so that everyone can be aware and so that maybe we can put ourselves out of business. That's the goal, is to put ourselves out of business so that nobody needs shelter from domestic violence.
That would be really good, right? It's hard to get good. You know, as a young person, it's hard to see really good relationship models, right?
Yes.
Like, it's hard to find them. Like, we have our parents and they're good, you know. But like, even like my parents, they were great, but like, conflict resolution never happened around us. You know, they'd always like go and, you know, work out their conflicts in the other room, which was really nice. And I'm certainly benefit from not like seeing them argue with each other as much and things like that. But also, you know, growing up, I didn't have many conflict resolution strategies for my partnerships, you know, and like that's a really important step, you know, in sort of mitigating, you know, hard relationships, is to have those types of things. Yeah. Are you okay? Yeah. And so I just like, I really appreciate that you're talking and having these conversations with folks and starting these conversations. And it sounds like, you know, also like the crisis line has a role to play here in like letting people know like, oh, maybe that's not a healthy relationship you're in, or maybe, you know, or maybe it is, but, you know, like having someone else to kind of bounce that off is really helpful, because we don't always know, you know, where the line is or should be, or, you know, how far past the line we need to be before we intervene or not intervene, right? And this is complicated.
Exactly.
For everyone, you know.
And that's the bottom line, is relationships are complex and it's hard to know sometimes, you know? And so I do encourage people to call. You're like, I don't know, is this abuse? Because like you said, we grow up in all different types of households. And some of them could be abusive, but it's been normalized because that's what we grew up with. And so if, you know, I like to tell people, if your intuition is telling you that it's off, give us a call and just get that, ask your questions and have someone that can really support you there.
Yeah. Intuition is such a powerful thing here, right? You know, especially women's intuition, and like there's so much of that is so right. And we, you know, growing up and in our culture, we don't always value our intuition as much as as much as it deserves the value that we should be giving it, right? Absolutely. You know, it's there, like, you know it. It's, listening is hard. Listening to yourself is hard sometimes. So what are some of the things that community can do to help survivors of domestic violence and these types of relationship breakdowns? Like, what can I do to help my friends, for instance? Or is there some of those? Do you have some of those ideas?
Absolutely. So one of the things that I wanted to kind of say in relation to intuition is there's a lot of dynamics that go into abuse. And one of those dynamics is gaslighting, and it actively works against your intuition. So if you've been gaslit enough, or maybe you grew up in a family where your voice didn't matter and your needs didn't matter, and so your intuition can be off for a lot of reasons. So don't beat yourself up if for some reason you didn't listen to your intuition, because that's quite, to be honest, if someone says you didn't listen to your intuition and so this happened to you, then that's victim blaming. And that's one of the things you shouldn't say to anyone as a tip. If you're, wanting some tips of how to support someone that you might know who is a survivor, believe them. So many stories come out, unfortunately, posthumously, of people that didn't believe the survivor. And there's so many stories of survivors who either took their own life because, like I said, posthumously, or survivors that fought and fought and fought for someone to finally believe them and for their perpetrator to be brought to justice. So, excuse me. The really important piece that I always try to say is just as simple as believing them, and then finding out, what do they need? Sometimes, oftentimes, if you have been assaulted in some way, or abused in some way, you are in a fight or flight mindset, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mindset. So in other words, you're sort of acting from your animal brain, your instinctual brain, your unevolved brain, where all of your skills live. And so as a friend, you can just be that support to help them think through something and help them get to something that they need. If that's an ER, if that is a safe place to stay for the night, like whatever it is. And then the last thing is check in on them, because healing isn't linear and it takes a long time. And so to be that person to check in is really valuable. A little story that I have is that, I'm a survivor, and my best friend, when I was in crisis, we would talk every night. And that was the one thing that I knew that I had to look forward to that day. And that's what kind of got me through the day. And so just her taking the time, 15 minutes of her day, to talk to me went a long way. So just keeping in mind those people that are struggling, and especially the survivors, and check in on them.
Yeah. Gaslighting's a really big one, for sure. Like, that one took me a while to figure out, that it was, in my journey of, like, it was happening to me. I felt crazy, firstly. I was like, I'm crazy. I must be forgetting things, or like, oh, it didn't happen that way, but I must have just been seeing it wrong, or maybe I'm crazy. I didn't remember it right, or like, whatever. I should give them the benefit of the doubt, because what they're saying is, they're having this reaction to whatever, and I took a lot of understand. I didn't understand what it was at first, because it's, as you said, it works totally counter to your intuition. Your intuition is saying, like, this person is in England, we're having you on, taking the piss, in British, and it's winding you up, perhaps, or like, and then you're like, oh, right. But then when you start noticing, you start pushing back, that person doubles down in many of those cases, because their integrity is now at stake, right? You're saying, no, like, you're wrong. I'm not wrong, and all of that house of cards that they've built in this gaslighting world becomes fragile, right? When you poke that, you get a reaction from that person, and that's something that's to be, that's better off avoided in many cases, as the person that you are. So it's cool thanks for bringing it up, right? These things are, it's hard to break them down. I'm glad we also have social media to help us kind of see these things from others' perspectives too. If people have, it's often, there are lots of good kind of reels out there talking about narcissistic, recovery and things like that have also been really helpful. So yeah, that's cool that, there's a lot of work that people need to get involved and do. I appreciate you bringing it up.
Yeah. Well, the healthy relationship dynamic in general is real love is respect. Respecting your boundaries, respecting your autonomy, respecting your needs. And so I think with gaslighting, it's sort of the hallmark of domestic violence in that the abuser is denial.
Yeah.
There's just no accountability.
Yeah.
Typically with abusive relationships. And so, the survivor is blamed because they can do no wrong.
Yeah.
So, and it's a manipulation tool. So it's coercive control. It's one of the dynamics of that, which is a dynamic of abuse. Like oftentimes the physical abuse is talked about and looked at, but there's so many other types of abuse out there.
Yeah. And they're hard to spot. I guess what I was trying to make in my long-winded way was they're hard to spot sometimes. These points of abuse, and hard to spot in your own relationship, but also in like your friends' relationships or other family relationships. It's not always easy to spot, and it's worth trying to spot, and it's worth asking questions, right? So let's talk about consent, right? Consent's obviously it's a big wide-ranging topic. We're not going to get into all of it today, but there's lots of ways that we can use consent both in our relationships, but also in helping survivors talk about what's going on, right? You want to talk
Absolutely.
About,
I love that. I love talking about consent. Excuse me 1 minute. So there's an acronym that I use called FRIES, FRIES. And so the deal with consent is that it is freely given. So someone is giving consent freely. That means that they're able to give consent. We can talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but there's that, the one aspect of the FRIES is that it's specific to that situation. And I think we had discussed this a little bit, was that, for instance, if you're making out with someone and you both have consented to that, if you want to kind of move to the next base, so to speak, you would need consent from both parties to then do that. Like it doesn't assume, and also consent isn't assumed because you got married to each other, right? So you still need consent inside an intimate partnership where both people are committed to each other. You still need consent. So it can still be sexual assault, even if you're married. Another, I like to recommend the T consent video.
I love the T consent video. It's great.
It's so fun. And it's such a good example and such a simple example of consent. So it's like, it's as basic as, if you ask someone if they want tea and they're enthusiastically say yes, and then you go make them some tea. But if you come back and they decide in the time that you were gone that they don't want tea, you can't force them to drink tea.
Right.
And so the video goes on these other examples of like, if the person is asleep on the floor, don't force them to drink tea.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of the cognition piece. Like if they're not cognitively aware to give consent, then you can't, it's not consent.
Yeah.
And that even can be case by case. Like if there's some kind of developmental issue, like that could come up, like some kind of cognitive issue where the person, are they cognitively capable of giving consent? So there's a lot of different aspects to it. But I really like the consent video. And one of the things that I thought was one of the examples is like, if the person's awake on the couch and you ask them if they want tea and they say yes, and you go make them tea and then you come back and they're asleep on the floor, don't force them to drink tea, you know?
Yeah,
so it's
exactly.
like that whole thing of like, you know, if in the time that between you giving consent and then maybe they become intoxicated, right? Yeah. Then that cognition has changed.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think on the piece about, and you know, kind of coming back to the intuition topic, is with consent is boundaries, right? Yeah. And so when we are manipulated into thinking our intuition is off, then we also assume our boundaries are off, you know, and all these other things that are intuition based are off. And so if it doesn't feel right, it's okay to say no. And also no can look like, I don't think so. And no can look like, it has to be enthusiastic. Also, if they say no, don't keep asking them.
Yeah.
And this can be, I'm not trying to make this about me, but I have an example of this that's really, I feel very subtle. And I was proud of myself, honestly, because I'm working on boundaries. I was proud of myself for recognizing it more quickly. And just the idea of how subtle it is. So I was having a phone call with someone that I was considering going on a date with, and I'd never met them before. So I like to do a phone call ahead of time and just see if it's someone I want to meet in person. So we were chatting and we were having this conversation, and he said, okay, well, I'm going to ask you a question. And then he asked me a question and we chatted about it a bit. And then he's like, okay, now it's your turn to ask a question. And I said, I don't want to ask a question. I'm not that kind of, I don't have a question to ask you. And he's like, oh, well, come on. This is what we're doing. This is a game. Ask me a question. And I was like, well, I don't want to do that. And he's like, well, I don't know what to say to that. And then I was like, well, you can say, okay, and not ask me again. And then I got off the phone with that person because that was such a huge red flag to me that he's still going to push and push. And that is not consent. So I like to give that example.
Yeah. In my world, I use enthusiastic consent.
Enthusiastic.
Yeah. Consent should be enthusiastic, yes, right?
Absolutely.
And and everything except yes means no.
Exactly.
Like everything.
Everything.
You know, like you could say anything you like. It's all good. If you say yes, that's enthusiastic. Or
absolutely.
Hopefully you say enthusiastically. If you don't, that meens no, right? Like everything else means no.
Absolutely.
I love the cup of tea video. Oh my gosh, I'm going to link it to this article, and we'll put it in. So do go watch the cup of tea video, folks. It's really, really, really good. It's a really good way of explaining it as well. There's also real benefits in talking about consent, right? So like when you're in committed partnership, you can say if you have a desire or you have something that you want to do that's you haven't done before, the best way to go about doing that is by talking about it, right? By asking, by talking it through and consenting to all those things. And actually, there's loads of fun there. There's loads of joy there in talking about desire, building anticipation, building that connection with one another, and getting consent for those things that maybe you've not done before, right? Yes. Which is so exciting. And then at the end of the day, you get to do the thing that you've been thinking about, right?
Yes.
Because you've brought it up in the right way, and that person's got time to think about it. Maybe they didn't say yes then, but they've thought about it for 6 days, and then they go, I'll go back to that conversation because actually there's some parts of that I could probably do with you, And I think, when I said to my partner the other day, I was like, I don't want any surprises. I don't, when we're having fun, I don't want any surprises at all. Zero. I want to talk about everything in advance because that's the most joy I can get. That's the most fun thing I can do. And I really want that anticipation. I don't just want the moment. I also want the pleasure of that anticipation. And that fantasy, you might want to call it, right? Like before it's happened, it's just a fantasy. And so I think there's also real joy in partnership and in loving relationship to have consent and to do new things and to be able to have those conversations. And when they say no, like you can just drop it, right? You don't have to wonder, are they going to do that thing? Are they not? Poking around in the dark, trying to see if that's no. Like, you don't have to wonder. You can live in that honesty with that person, and asking isn't going to make you break up, right? Unless the relationship is flawed already. And that's just a catalyst, right?
Well, it's safety.
Yeah, for sure. And so doing that in committed partnership, like that consent is fun, right? Consent is a good thing,
And it makes you have a deeper connection to each other and, you get to learn so much about each other through those conversations. And I'm a big proponent of curiosity. So with healthy relationships, being curious about where the other person is coming from and assuming the best. I always tell people, look for controlling behaviors and, always, because abuse is at the root, a power and control issue.
Yeah.
And so, like looking at those dynamics, like, is your partner trying to isolate you? Are they using tactics like gaslighting and like making it like when you share with them, they're pushing it off on you? Or, a healthy relationship, like you're saying, is connected and there's curiosity and you're supportive of one another. And I like to use the example of like a team, like you're rooting for each other and you're wanting the best for each other. And there's an openness and an expansiveness to the feeling and relationship, not a constricted feeling where you're feeling controlled or sad even, like, you want to feel uplifted and at peace and feeling really good to be your authentic self in that relationship.
Yeah. Cool. Oh, amazing. So last question. How can we support Helping Hands Against Violence, and what's the best way for us to do that?
Thank you. Well, we rely heavily on our community for so many things. I'm about to put out our newsletter for July, and it's all about community because we have so many amazing people coming, dropping off donations, and we can always use donations for clothing, women and children's clothing, new undergarments like underwear, bras, feminine hygiene products, cleaning supplies, because we need that for the shelter, shoes, and we also always are looking for like handyman help, like if you want to come mow our yard every once in a while, just like little things like that. We have a few people that come and help us, and we just rely on it. After this conversation we have today, I'm going to meet with 2 new volunteers. So volunteers are always appreciated. And then of course, we are a 501c3 nonprofit, so we always appreciate donations, monetary donations, and we really love it if you can become a regular donor. That's really helpful to us because we know we can count on your donation every month. And even anything as small as $10 to $15 really helps us. You can go to our website to donate, and we'll put my information out there. I'm assuming, and you can always contact me if you want to volunteer. I'm the one-stop shop for community outreach, prevention education, and I want to take my healthy relationships, sexual assault, and domestic violence talks on tour. So hit me up if you want me to come speak. And and I love tabling events. So you might see us around town. We're going to be at the farmers market and the ruins, and we're going to be at First Fridays in Hood River.
Cool.
So if you see me out and about, please come say hi, because I love meeting our community.
Say hi to Meg. Yay. That's cool. Well, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. We're going to put all those links and that consent video in the story. Do get in touch, if you've got any of those ways of support in helping hands against violence in Hood River. Do get in touch with them, find the link. And thanks so much for watching, everyone. Like and subscribe. You can follow us on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And thanks again for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Robin.
You're so welcome.
Lovely.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Take care.